I mean, Mom. Haven't you better get... Oh, no, don't stall. That won't. Oh. I mean, Mom.
First, you're just an ordinary Joe rocking around trying to make a living. Then you get famous, you get your first hit, and people ask you for your autograph, and you love it. There's nothing you want more than to do any amount of autographs. You know, you want them, I'll do them. Right. And you love it. That kind of wears off after about 3 or 4 years. You just suddenly start to think, wait a minute, what am I bloody signing for you for? You know, and I've come through another phase now, just thinking, oh yeah, it's okay again. So I've been like in and out of that phase, and fame's the same thing. I remember thinking at one time I've come to some kind of point of no return, where no matter even now if I say I don't want to be famous anymore, I'll be like Bridget Bardot, where she'd be a recluse, but still very famous, or Charlie Chaplin. They want to get away from it. And I remember thinking, oh, well, that's no use, because, you know, they're going to be after me even more. So those kind of things do come in. I think it's a very weird thing, fame. The interesting thing for me is that the only people who can ever write about it or ever get near to even explaining it most often don't want to, because it's the people who are famous themselves rather than the analysts or the commentators on it. Because the commentators can't quite get behind that mask until they're famous commentators, and even then it's still not the same. It's still a different thing. So there is a very weird kind of double-edged sword to fame.
Do you think that was John's reaction, why he's sort of...
No, I don't. I actually don't know, or don't really like to speak for John, but seeing as you asked me, like, my theory is just that he's done enough. He thinks he's done enough in all the things he wanted to do, except being himself. And I think now he's actually just turned on to actually living his own life. Sod everyone else. But it's not an aggressive thing, I don't think, from what I can see.
It's 8:31 on WPLJ New York. The temperature 53 under cloudy skies. WPLJ weather. Rain developing today. Temperatures will fall into the 40s. Windy and colder tonight with rain continuing. Low of 35. The rain may end as flurries at daybreak, then clearing, windy and cold tomorrow. After today, the name Mark Chapman will be almost a household name. He's the 25-year-old from Honolulu who's charged with murdering John Lennon. Cops accuse him of firing 7 shots at Lennon outside the former Beatles' apartment, the Dakota, late last night. Tom O'Leary heard those gunshots and tells me he ran outside to find out what happened. He saw Mark Chapman being led away by the cops.
The expression on his face was kind of a silly grin, and he was just kind of standing there, and the cops were just pushing him back and pushing him back. He not insinuating he was trying to get away, but they were just making sure that he was secure at that place. He seemed like he was in another world. I think he must have been a nut. I never seen him around here before. I went back.
I saw him here.
Did you hear what he said? You did see him?
I didn't see what happened, but I saw him here all week.
Yeah.
Several people told me they've seen Chapman hanging outside the Dakota for the last several days. In fact, cops say he asked John Lennon for his autograph yesterday afternoon and got it. We don't know much at all about this guy. Cops call him a wacko. We know that he's an unemployed security guard. We know that he bought his gun just 6 weeks ago in Honolulu. But we don't know what he had against Lennon, and we don't know if he even confessed to the cops. The police are handling this case with kid gloves. One lieutenant says this is as important as the assassination of John Kennedy. I heard that sentiment repeated over and over again while I was outside the Dakota apartments earlier this morning. As one guy put it,
growing with them, we're talking about this love, peace, this and that, and all of a sudden he's the man you don't want to be hit. He's the man who talked about all that, and he's the one who get hit. So, it's very, 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 very sad. What are you going to do? Can't cry, it's like, I don't know, what are you going to do? It's not good. It's not good what happens. Like, every time there's one wonderful man, boom, gets hit. Can't relate to Kennedy too much, but you can relate to John Lennon very much, and we all can relate to him, all of us.
Paul McCartney was pale and visibly upset when reporters caught up with him at his home in Sussex, England. Paul told reporters, "I can't take it in at the moment." McCartney said John was a great guy. He is going to be missed by the whole world. It's very ironic. Hours before he died, John Lennon gave his last interview, and he said he hoped to die before Yoko, because if she died, he couldn't carry on. We hear that Yoko became hysterical when she heard that her husband died. She was with him at the time he was shot, and she drove with him in a police car to Roosevelt Hospital. Now, we've had no announcement yet about funeral arrangements. As soon as we hear, of course, we'll pass that along to you. But one thing I would like to tell you is that Yoko asks you not to come to the Dakota apartment. She is appreciative of the grief that you share with her, but again, Yoko would like you to stay away from the Dakota. I'm Shelley Sunstein, WPLJ News.
Thank you very much, Shelley. I'm Jim Kerr. This is WPLJ, and it's a bit of a grim morning. Here's the weather forecast for you.
This is a special report from ABC News. I'm Mary Margaret Myers. John Lennon is dead. You can't believe it, you don't want to believe it, but it's true, and a whole generation around the world is in shock. After nearly 5 years as a house husband, letting wife Yoko Ono manage their business affairs, John staying home, taking care of their son Sean, finally last summer Lennon began recording again. ABC's Geraldo Rivera, who covered John Lennon for many years, saw him just 6 weeks ago.
John Lennon was back. John Lennon, after a 5-year absence, was finally back in the studios, had finally released a record album that was receiving general acclamation from the fans. He was back not as the philosopher Lennon, not as the political Lennon, not as the Lennon who makes a lot of domestic news for his style and flamboyance, but rather as the musician.
Lennon had left the recording studio last night about 10. He was going to stop for a bite to eat when he and Yoko pulled up in a limousine to the Dakota, the luxury apartment building on New York's Central Park West where they lived. As John got out of the car and began to go inside, a man sprung up out of the shadows and fired at least 5 times. New York policeman Tony Palma was one of the first to arrive at the scene.
He was laying on the floor, face down.
He'd gone inside the building?
Yeah.
Was he taken inside, or did he go on his own?
He must have ran in on his own.
You say he was...
Or inside the
Inside the office. Inside the office.
You say he was face down. Did you know who it was?
No, I didn't.
Was any efforts made to revive him? What was done at the scene for him?
I just turned him over, and I saw he was hit pretty bad.
Hit in the chest?
Seen that way.
Was there a lot of blood?
Yes. We picked him up, and I made the decision that we should get him out of there to the hospital as soon as possible, and we moved him in a radio car to Roosevelt Hospital.
Yoko Ono was not hurt. Police have arrested and charged Mark David Chapman, a native of Hawaii, who's reportedly been in New York only a week or so. Witnesses say he's been hanging around the Dakota apartments for days, hours spent huddled in the doorway yesterday. Some people who saw him say he stopped John Lennon early in the day yesterday and asked for an autograph on a record album. John signed. At the hospital, doctors worked frantically to make John Lennon live. WABC TV news producer Alan Weiss was near the emergency room where John was rushed.
The hospital, which plays music in the corridors, the song that was playing on the music was All My Loving. They were still working on him. About 5 or 6 minutes after that, Yoko Ono began to scream, "Oh no, no, oh no, no."
Lennon is believed to have been shot 5 times, but there were 7 wounds, apparently some where the bullets exited. Doctors say he died almost immediately because some of the vital arteries in his chest were destroyed by the shots. John Lennon is dead. He was 40. ABC's David Leslie was on a street corner not far from the scene where John Lennon had been killed. It was around 1 a.m., and Leslie discovered this scene.
The news of John Lennon's death spread throughout the city of New York like wildfire. There are many musicians who stand on the streets of the city and play their instruments. People come by and make donations. I'm listening to an accordion player on 70th Street and Columbus Avenue in New York playing I Believe in Yesterday, the Beatles song. Very few people coming by here, yet this man sitting in front of a grocery store all by himself playing this song in memory of the Beatles. David Leslie, ABC News, New York.
The music was your youth. The music was the Beatles, George, Ringo, Paul, and John. ABC rock music expert Lou O'Neill.
John Lennon is one of the most legendary figures in the history of rock and roll. He and Paul McCartney single-handedly shaped the generation in the 1960s that revolutionized not only the world of music, but also revolutionized social lifestyle, also political involvement young people expressed in the late 60s and 1970s.
John's comeback album, just released weeks ago, is called John and Yoko, Double Fantasy. His first single in years is called Starting Over. John Lennon was like most other middle class kids in Liverpool, except his father left him, and his mother raised him alone. Another difference, he went to art school. In an interview for the History, Lennon talked about his education.
In school, I was leaving trace of the art folk. I also recommend you need to go to art school. You may as well just pick up living, you see, so it raised me to go to art school, which I went to. And failed that too.
John Lennon did not find changing the history of music. It would fail an entire generation. It's impossible to believe, but impossible to cry. Hundreds of more reconciling in New York City, around the Dakota, and in the This has been a special news. Robert Myers, ABC News, New York.